Good evening. My name is Lauren Anderson, and I'm the Manager of Alumni Relations here at Johnson & Wales University. Thank you for joining us for today's session titled Sip with JWU, Celebrating Cinco de Mayo. We are excited to bring this program to you virtually and look forward to learning about this exotic spirit and what makes each style so different. Before we get started, I'd like to review a few housekeeping items. This session is being recorded and will be available for future viewing. With the exception of the presenter, all participants have been muted. Please leave your cameras turned off until the tasting portion of the presentation. When directed, if you would like to turn your camera on, please do so. If you'd like to ask a question, please use the chat button at the bottom of your screen. We will refer to this section to take questions at the conclusion of the presentation. Set your view to speaker view in the top right corner of your screen. This will be the best way to see our presenter. Since we can't be together for this program in person, please keep it social. Feel free to share pictures of your at-home setup, a selfie, or photo of who you are enjoying this session with. Be sure to tag @JWU Alumni in your posts on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Associate Professor Nicholas Makris. Professor Makris is an Associate Professor at Johnson & Wales University in the College of Hospitality in the Food and Beverage Department on the Providence campus. Prior to joining JWU, Makris owned Andrea's Greek restaurant in Providence, Rhode Island. Professor Makris received his MBA from Johnson & Wales University, as well as a bachelor's in hospitality sales and meeting management. He also holds an associate's from the Business College of Athens, Greece in hospitality management. Additionally, he has earned a hospitality management diploma from the Educational Institute of the American Hotel and Motel Association. He is currently in the final stage of his doctoral degree in researching the role of leadership and innovation in the food and beverage industry. His love of the hospitality industry and all things food and beverage began at a young age while living in Athens, Greece, where the tradition of hospitality is a timeless characteristic of Greek culture. He has held various managerial positions in the restaurant and hospitality fields, both in Greece and the US. He is a member of the Rhode Island Hospitality Association and the United States Bartenders Guild, USBG. He considers himself a foodpreneur and recently launched a company specializing in ghost kitchen installation. He has been featured in many media outlets, including WUNC North Carolina Public Radio, Providence Business News, Restaurant Inc. magazine, FSR magazine, Restaurant Startup and Growth magazine, and he has had several presentations at the Nightclub and Bar Show. We are so grateful to have him with us this evening. Please join me in welcoming Professor Nick Makris.
I want to make sure, can everybody see me and hear me?
Good to go.
Awesome. Okay, let me see here. Just give me a second here. Okay. So, Lauren, thank you so much, and Lori, for providing me the opportunity to host this event. And thank you, Lauren, for that great introduction. I really appreciate it. I want to start off by saying that these events are extremely important to me for various factors, two different reasons. One is that it provides me the opportunity to reconnect with the Johnson & Wales community and the alumni and previous classmates that I've had over the years. And I also think and believe that it's a very important thing to have these events in order to bring us together amongst these unprecedented times. It does, although we are apart from each other, we can still see each other and we can still have conversations. So I think, again, these events are extremely important to me, at least, and I'm sure to Lauren and Lori and her team. They do a great job hosting all of these events. I really appreciate it. I want to start off by saying how proud I am of being a member of the Johnson & Wales community for two reasons. Number one, when I arrived here as an exchange student from Johnson & Wales, upon completion of my degrees, Johnson & Wales afforded me the education and the skills that I needed in order to open my first restaurant. And not only was I able to open the restaurant, I was successful at it. After 18 years, I decided to change the trajectory of my career. And that's when Johnson & Wales again stepped up and gave me the opportunity to become a faculty member and share my industry experiences with the students here at Johnson & Wales. So Johnson & Wales holds a very dear and very large part of my heart. I want to welcome all of you to the event. Thank you for being here. Great time. I think tequila, Cinco de Mayo is right around the corner. What better spirit to celebrate Cinco de Mayo with tequila? And not only Cinco de Mayo, but it's also spring. Spring to me means tequila. I don't know why I associate those things, but it does sort of, one fits the other. Today, I'm coming to you from the Bistro 61. For those of you who haven't been on campus or graduated prior to the Bistro being constructed, this is part of the food service beverage management degree. And this class or this course was actually, for those of you again who remember, in the Statler dining room. In around 2011, I believe, Bistro 61 was inaugurated. It is a full service restaurant run totally and completely by the students. It is their capstone course. It is my favorite course by far to teach here at Johnson & Wales, and I often spend more time here than I do in my own home, which my wife isn't very happy with, but that's another story. So, tequila, let me just start real quick with tequila. I believe with any spirit, right? I think it's extremely important to understand the history of it, what it is that we are consuming. I believe that it enhances the experience, just knowing how it was created, its origins, how it evolved over time, just enhances that experience and helps us better enjoy ourselves when we're having that cocktail and enjoying it, whether we're alone or with family or friends. So let me share my screen here and we will proceed with okay. So tequila, I love tequila. Love tequila. I think it's one of the most underestimated and underutilized spirits in the beverage world. Most of us, if not all of us, can probably associate tequila with doing shots in college or with a margarita or a paloma. Tequila has grown extremely further than that as far as its trajectory and how it's been applied to the modern beverage industry. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And tequila is much more than what at least I remember in my college years it being. It's evolved. There are premium types of tequilas out there that are just of excellent quality. And we're going to get into that as I proceed in through the PowerPoint. Okay, so again, welcome to the world of tequila. We're going to start with a short history and production portion of the presentation. After that, I'm going to go into a tequila tasting. We're going to be tasting two different tequilas right here that I have. The Luna Azul, which is the Blanco or silver here, and the Añejo right here. And we'll get to that later on in the presentation. I'm going to sort of walk you through the process of how to properly taste the tequila or any spirit for that matter. Again, we will be tasting the Blanco versus the Añejo. I will be making a tequila cocktail for you at the end. I'm going to surprise you. I'm not going to tell you exactly what it is yet because I want to keep that suspense going. And at the end, open for any questions that any of you might have. So let me. So, history of tequila. And again, as I stated earlier, I think understanding and just realizing the history of a certain beverage or spirit just enhances the experience when you are enjoying it. A lot of us or a lot of consumers don't understand that tequila has a 3,000-year-old history. And that history began with the Aztecs in Mexico, in what is now known as Mexico. And what the early form of tequila began by fermenting agave, which in Aztecs terms were called maguey. And it's just another way of saying agave. And that happened approximately 1000 BC to around 200 AD. So again, roughly 3,500 years ago. And I think this coincides. You can see a lot of the spirits that we talk about in class and in this program, it's very similar to wine. Wine has been around for at least 4,000 years, ancient Greece and ancient Rome. Same thing with beer. It's been around since the ancient Egyptians. So I'd like to believe that tequila shares that same sort of historical value. The first evidence of tequila production was found on stone walls in the Mexican highlands. And again, I think, why did I bring this up? The reason I brought this up is because, again, I think that for a culture to actually illustrate a certain spirit or food and incorporate that into their civilization by depicting it on cave walls just signifies the importance it had to their civilization. Originally, it was a sap-like substance which was derived from the agave plant, and that substance was known as pulque. And this substance also played for the Aztecs, was extremely important in their culture as far as their religion goes. And again, relating back to the wine and the beer, as I stated earlier, and their significance in history, we can see that it, again, it played an extremely important role in the civilization of the early Aztecs. In the early 1400s and 1500s, the Spanish introduced distillation. And how did this happen? So as the Spanish started to conquer that area, which is now known as Mexico, the Spaniards were known for drinking wine and not gin, I'm sorry, rum. So as they started progressing with their conquest of the Mexican territory, they started running out of their rum and wine. So they sort of had to come up with another way to relieve their stress, if you will. And that's where they found the pulque, which was the raw material used to make that original tequila, and they started distilling it. And that's how the early form of tequila that we know today sort of came around. In the 17 and 1800s, modern tequila was born. It wasn't until 1758, that tequila was distilled for commercial use. So it was actually sold for monetary value, and it was also bartered for various other goods. And that was created by the Cuervo family. And the second family that distilled its tequila for commercial use was the Souza family family in the late 1800s. And again, these two tequilas are still around today. So they have a very, very long history in the tequila industry. In 1818 to 1821, we had the Mexican War of Independence. As Mexico started gaining ground and winning their war against the Spaniards, they did not have to rely upon the Spanish products that were being imported into the area. And therefore, tequila started to become more prominent. And as it became more prominent, it became a sense of national pride for the Mexicans and the army. So that's really when it sort of took off, if you will. More recent history in the 1920s with Prohibition, tequila was sought after by bootleggers because, as we all know, the alcohol was outlawed, right? And it was easy for Americans to cross the border into Mexico, grab tequila, and cross the border again into the United States without being caught. So that sort of gave it its first introduction into the United States. In the 1940s, during World War II, tequila grew in popularity because the European spirits became scarce. Because of the war, not as many products were able to be imported into the United States, including spirits, wines, and any other alcoholic beverage. And tequila sort of took the place of all those products because, again, it was easily imported from the South, from Mexico. The Olympic Games in Mexico City in 1968 put tequila on the forefront of the world. And that's where it really gained its worldwide popularity. And finally, in 1974, tequila was officially signed into law as the intellectual property of Mexico. So that's just a tidbit of how tequila came about from its ancient history all the way into the mid 20th century. Some things that we do need to know, that are interesting to know rather, is that tequila can only be produced in Mexico, period. And that sort of falls under the same category or auspice as champagne. Champagne can only be produced and named or called champagne if it's produced in the Champagne region of France. Same thing with Prosecco. Prosecco can only be called Prosecco if it's produced in the Prosecco region of Italy. Same thing applies for tequila. It can only be made in Mexico, and in only 5 regions in Mexico are certified as denomination of origin. The first one is Jalisco, which is actually the home of a town called Tequila, and that through oral history tells us that that's where tequila in its modern form was sort of created and produced. After that, we have Guanajuato, Michoacan, Nayarit, and Tamaulipas. And if you can look at the map, those are all, the first 4 are actually on the southwest portion of Mexico, which is faces the Pacific Ocean, and the Tamaulipas region is on the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic Ocean. And that does play a difference, which we're going to get into when I talk about Terrier. Terroir. I like to compare this to wine. As we know, wine needs a certain climate to develop the sugars and the grapes and the type of wine that is being produced. Well, it's the same thing for tequila. Terroir basically is a French word which is translated into climate, the soil, and the environment, the overall environment that the tequila is grown in. So for tequila, the prime elevation, or for the blue agave plant rather, the prime elevation is 2,600 to 4,000 feet. The soil is volcanic. And that also helps with the water, which I'll get into in the next slide, but there's volcanic aquifers, which actually purifies the water, and it gives the agave plants more of a mineral taste. The temperature, the ideal temperature for the agave plants to grow is between 71 to 78 degrees Fahrenheit. And agave plants that are grown in and harvested in these areas are traditionally smaller than the ones found in other areas. Typical aromas and flavors of the agave plant in these areas and these specific areas of destination: spice, earthy, and herbal. And we're going to get into that a little bit more. Classification of tequilas. Believe it or not, there are 166 species of agave, which is about 30% more than the species of grapes that are found and made into wine. 125 of these species are found in Mexico. The only agave plant that can be used to make tequila is called the Blue Weber. And the reason it's called, or I'm sorry, the Weber Blue, the reason it gets the name Weber Blue is because Mark Weber was the first botanist to actually discover this plant and introduce it into modern botany. In order to be classified as a tequila, it must contain 51% of blue agave plant, and the other 49% comes from other alcohol sources. Can be usually it's sugars and a neutral spirit. These types of tequilas are called mixto, which means mixed, right? Mixto in Spanish is basically mixed, so it's a mixed tequila, but it's still called tequila. So tequila, as long as it has 51% blue agave spirit, it is considered a tequila. The only tequilas that can be called or designated, if you will, 100% blue agave tequila, it must contain 100% blue agave juice. And that's the only way it can be called 100% blue agave. And finally, it must have an alcohol by volume of 35 to 55%, which equates to about 80 proof if you average it out. Producing agave is a perplexed thing. It's a perplexed system. It's not very sustainable because each agave plant needs a minimum of 6 to 8 years for each plant to mature. So you can understand the complexity of these agave farmers, if you will. So as they mature, once they are mature, the leaves are cut off, preserving the heart of the plant known as the piña. And you can see to the left the picture of a worker actually cutting the leaves off of the agave plant, leaving the piña. And all of this is done by hand. There are no mechanics involved, no machinery involved. All of this is done by hand. Okay, I'm just hearing voices, I'm sorry. After that, once the piñas have been cleared of all of the leaves, they are quartered and they are slowly roasted 24 to 48 hours in ovens, also known as hornos in Mexican, or in the Mexican culture. Once that is complete, the hearts are then pressed and shredded. And what that does, it releases the juices. And that juice is known as honey water. Now, the reason it's called honey water is because the original juices that are extracted from the agave plant are extremely sweet, extremely sweet. So water is added in order to dilute that, hence the name honey water. After that, and the necessary amount of water is placed and the mix is correct, or the analogy, or not the analogy, the ratio of water to agave is reached, they're placed in fermentation tanks. After that, yeast is added just like any other spirit. And the liquid is left to ferment for about 24 to 96 hours. Once that is done, fermentation is, after fermentation rather, it is distilled for a minimum of 2 times. Now we're getting into the classifications of tequila. There are multiple classifications, but for time, I picked the 3 or 4 most popular and most known. We have Blanco tequila, which is also known as white and silver. This is unaged. It is fermented, distilled, and it can either rest until it's ready to bottle, to be bottled, or it can be bottled immediately and sold and distributed. I find that Blanco tequila is the best tequila to use for mixed cocktails. And we're going to get into that once we get into our cocktails. The next is Reposado, which is rested and aged. It's aged between 60 and 364 days. It has to be less than 1 year. And it's aged in oak casks. And that's what gives it a little bit of its tint. As you can see here, this is a Reposado, and it's a little bit darker than the white, but not as dark as the añejo. And that's, again, due to the fact of how much time it takes to sit in the casks. And then we have the añejo, which is extra aged, and it has to be at least for 1 year, but no less than 3 years. Lauren, how am I doing on time?
We're good, just keeping it going.
We have an extra añejo, which is ultra aged. And again, that is just the same tequila that's aged in oak casks or barrels. And that's aged for more than 3 years. Now, one misconception is the Joven, or it's also known as gold tequila. That is the tequila that is mostly used for commercial purposes in restaurants and bars. That is a lesser expensive tequila or lesser quality. And the reason it's gold is it's not because it's been aged in any way, but colorings and flavorings have been added in order to give it that golden hue or color. Tequila and mezcal. There's been a debate, and I think a lot of people don't understand the difference, or they don't know exactly what mezcal is. So all tequilas can be mezcal, but not all mezcals can be tequilas. They're both made from agave. What is the difference? Mezcal can be produced from up to 50 species of the agave plant. So basically, it's just a mixture of various agave species. Tequila, on the other hand, can only be made by the blue agave or the Weber blue agave plant. So there is a difference. Another huge difference is the way that it is fermented or roasted. Mezcal is usually roasted or fired, if you will. That's the term that we use in earthen ovens. As you can see in the top picture there, the top illustration, they have the piñas buried in a hole in the ground, basically. And what they do is they add charcoal and they cover that with dirt and they let it roast for a pronounced period of time. I am not a fan of mezcal. It has a very ashy taste and a very smoky taste, and it's just, it's a very distinct flavor. On the other hand, The agave that's used for tequila is steamed in ovens. And the picture and the illustration on the bottom is an old school oven, basically, or a traditional oven, let's say, used to bake as opposed to fire roasting the piñas. Tequila tasting. So let's get started with that. What we need, take 2 glasses. Do they need to be long and narrow? Absolutely not. Anything that you have at your house is totally fine. It's totally fine. I'm hoping that all of you have your tasting sheet available. What you want to do is always start from light to dark. So I'm going to put my silver on this side, and that's what we're going to start with, and my añejo on this side, because we always want to start from light to dark. The reason I did not pick the Respaldado is because I really wanted you guys to experience the contrast and the difference in the flavor profile between the 2 types of tequila. So let's pour ourselves. If you're ready, you can join me. If you'd like to open your cameras and follow along, that'd be great. For those of you who would like to sort of make this a little bit more personable. So again, you hold your glass at about a 45-degree angle. You don't have to pour a lot. First thing to do is look at the appearance. Best thing to use when you're doing that, take a blank white piece of paper and you can hold it against that and see basically the clarity. So for this, I've already taken my notes. It's crystal clear. I can basically see right through it. It's transparent. Maybe another descriptor that you would want to use is translucent. Now we're going to smell it. One thing people do, don't stick your entire nose in it and take a big whiff. This does have, excuse me, this does have a high alcohol content. So if you take an initial big whiff, it will sort of, it won't give you the enjoyment, let's say, of actually smelling the different aromas that are found in the tequila. So I'm just going to go ahead and I keep my mouth slightly open because I just experience those aromas much easier, and it's just easier for me. There's no right or way of doing it, right or wrong way of doing it. You can either keep your mouth closed or slightly open. It doesn't really matter. So as I sniff this, I do get a little bit of citrus, a little bit of herbal, and a little bit of alcohol, obviously, right? Another thing you might want to do, I forgot to say this, tequila is my favorite spirit because it has the least amount of calories than any other spirit. And I just, I think that's great for people that are on, you know, healthy lifestyles and so on and so forth. So I enjoy tequila, not just for its taste, but for its low calorie count. If you want to sort of tell, or the amount of sugar, you can just swirl the tequila in the glass. And what you'll see is legs. We call these legs. So if you see these streaks that are coming down, I don't know if you can see them off of my glass, but the thicker and the longer these legs take to get to the bottom, usually tells us that it has a higher sugar content, okay? And then again, that's just the way this tequila has been distilled, okay? So let's taste it. I'm gonna taste it. Again, don't take a big gulp. You want enough just to hold in your mouth, cover your tongue. Don't swallow it immediately. Let it sit on your tongue and let's see what flavors or what tastes we get. And again, before I get into what I tasted, taste and flavor are often used synonymously. When you're tasting or doing spirit tastings, whether it's wine, beer, or spirits, taste and flavor are two different things. Taste is what you experience on your tongue as far as the sweetness, the bitterness, the tanginess, the sourness. That is what we pertain to as taste, right? So what I tasted was a little salty to me. Again, like try to open your minds a little bit, right? And just try to think about what those initial reactions or those tastes, what your taste buds actually felt when you took that initial sip. I didn't get any sweetness or any bitterness. It was a little sour and salty to me. Again, there's no right or wrong answer, right? This is different for every person, right? So every person experiences different things when they taste spirit. Now, as far as flavor, flavor is a combination of aroma and taste. And this is where you're going to get the actual flavor, right, of the actual category, let's say, of what you're tasting. So again, you just want to take a little sip, run it around in your mouth, let it coat your tongue. As I swallow it, I get a little astringency in the back of my throat, which indicates high alcohol or a larger proof. Like I said, this is about 40% alcohol or 80 proof. I taste a little bit of fruity and herbal notes. And again, that's just me. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong. So what I'm going to do now is just cleanse my palate with some water and go ahead and do our tasting on the second tequila, which is Añejo, which has been, if you recall what I said earlier, has been aged for no more than 3 years. And again, same process, just skip down. Clarity, again, it's amber, maybe golden, if you want to call it golden, maybe hay brown, different terminology for different people, doesn't matter. And it is transparent, which means you can see through it, even though there's the color there. It's not cloudy. So it's a transparent, which means it's good. It's purified, it's been distilled. There's no impurities in the alcohol. Again, you want to smell it. Don't take too much of a whiff because then it'll sort of throw you off. I smell a lot of smoke, a little bit of pepper. Again, that's me. You may experience something else. Taste or mouthfeel. I don't get sweet. I get a little bit of bitterness. And again, that saltiness from that. And again, that's just each person has his own different, taste buds, and they experience these tastes differently. The flavor, again, I don't want to take another sip because I'm not a very heavy drinker. I'm a lightweight. But what I did get out of that was smokiness, and I think that can be because of the way it's aged in the oak barrels. So that smokiness from the wood, the oakiness from the wood, and there is some vanilla and spice that I can also taste. A lot of things that, or a lot of people always ask me, well, what kind of foods can you pair with tequila? And a lot of them are surprised when I tell them that tequila can be paired with a wide variety of foods. some examples that I have here. Grilled seafood goes extremely well with a silver or a Blanco tequila. If you remember, the Blanco tequila is a little bit citrusy, goes together, it goes well with seafood and shrimp. Something similar to white wine, right? If you want to use that comparison, it's totally fine. Goes well with vegetables, right? Green peppers and avocados. Also goes well with citrusy foods and fresh herbs. So any dishes that have a citrus component to it, fresh herbs, cilantro, parsley, things of that nature. One dish that I absolutely enjoy having with tequila is ceviche. And again, that incorporates seafood. It's raw seafood, obviously, but it is still seafood. It has citrus because it is cooked or in lemon juice. And it just has that cilantro and those fresh herbs. So that is one of my favorite foods that I like to use or to eat or enjoy when I'm drinking my tequila. And then something that you could probably pair well with a añejo or a reposado is spicy meats, like pulled pork or a spiced rubbed meat. And let's get to our tequila cocktail. Just give me a second here. I'm going to pull up my recipe. Okay, so what I'm going to make, and I said I was going to surprise you guys, it was a margarita, but we're going to spice it up a little bit. We're going to make a Prosecco margarita. Margaritas are probably the most versatile type of tequila drink that you can basically add anything that you want to it, and it will still be enjoyable. Fruit juices, purees. It's very, very versatile. So what we're going to do first is I'm going to take my shaker, and some ice. I'm going to take my, and again, when you're making, when we're making mixed cocktails, I always like to go with a Blanco or a silver tequila. And that's because it's neutral. It doesn't have the smokiness or the caramel flavors of the aged tequilas. And if you were to use an aged tequila or a non-Blanco, it would probably alter the taste in a non-favoring way. So that's why I always like to use, at least in mixed tequilas or mixed cocktails with tequilas, I always like to use the more neutral type. So we're going to add 1.5 ounces. I'm going to go 2 ounces because it's Thursday and I don't have school tomorrow. So I'm going to add 2 ounces of that. I am going to use my agave syrup. The reason I use agave syrup and not simple syrup is because I think it enhances the flavor of the margarita. Again, the raw product of a tequila is agave syrup, and this has been diluted. It's basically an agave simple syrup, right? So it's equal parts agave to water. You boil it, you thicken it a little bit, you let it reduce. That's about 1/2 ounce, so that's just a little squirt. Add that in there. After that, we take our triple sec. And the reason I'm using triple sec, so triple sec is the inexpensive version of Cointreau or Grand Marnier. I'm not a fan of using high-end products in a mixed cocktail. You can't tell the difference. You really can't. And it doesn't really, the flavors are the same. And again, there's so many ingredients in there that it just dilutes the initial taste, let's say, of the triple sec. So here I need 1/2 ounce. So I'm just going to go And again, you can adjust this as you please. If you like a sweeter product, add more triple sec. If you like a more tart or sour product, you can add more lemon juice. So what I'm going to do now is add my lemon juice, which I already pre-portioned. Lime juice, I'm sorry, that was 2 ounces. I'm going to shake it up. Let it sit for a second. I have 3 different glasses here. There is no right or wrong way of serving a tequila or a cocktail or a margarita, right? I prefer something a little bit more elegant. I'm not a fan of the traditional margarita glass. Personal preference doesn't mean that, there's anything wrong with a traditional margarita glass, or you can use a highball. I think this is just a little bit more elegant. When I used to own my restaurant, I used to I would use glasses similar to this in order to, when I serve my my margaritas or cocktails. So I'm just going to add some more ice. I'm going to fill that up almost to the top. I'm going to take my already pre-mixed margarita here. I'm going to pour it. I'm going to strain it. So I'm using a strainer. If you don't have a strainer, you could use a spoon or a fork. And I'm going to go just about to the top. And to finish that off, we have some Prosecco. And I didn't open it earlier because I didn't want it to lose its fizz. So I'm just going to give me a quick second. I'll open this up. There we go. And again, you don't want to fill the glass all the way to the top because you're going to float the Prosecco right on top. And that's that. Then we can take our and add a lemon or a lime wedge, which could go like that. And the one thing I did forget, you can always salt this. I do not prefer salt. I think it alters the taste, but you're more than welcome to add salt to the rim. The way you would do that is just take this lime, obviously in an empty glass, wet the rim, you take your salt here, glass upside down, you rim the glass with the salt, and then you would proceed to pour the mixture into the glass. So I'm just going to take a taste of that and see how it came out. And if you all want to sort of follow with me, that'd be great. Perfect. Summertime, Cinco de Mayo is right around the corner. I think it's a perfect cocktail for this time of year, all summer. I think it's a great, great drink. Another popular drink that you guys might enjoy is a Paloma. That's more of a traditional Mexican drink that's more associated with tequila in Mexico. Let's put it that way. But a margarita is always a good way to go. So cheers. Any questions or anything I can answer?
Anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we will pull from the chat so that Nick can answer them for you. We have about 10 minutes to answer questions, so some great time to get some insight from the professional.
I share a question. It's okay to talk it out.
Sure.
I saw Nick when you were showing like the Blanco, or I guess maybe even your first slide. I saw Espolón was on there as one of them. I think that's become quite popular. I was surprised Cuervo wasn't on there. I'm just curious thoughts on like.
I'll tell you why.
There's a bunch of different brands. Like, is there better ones?
Absolutely,
like
absolutely. Cuervo is, how can I say it without being disrespectful to the brand? It's become the Budweiser of tequila. And I don't mean that in any, disrespectful way. It's a mixed tequila, which means it's not 100%, or it's not, how can I say it? It's a tequila that is used for commercial purposes. I don't know if that makes sense. And like I said during my PowerPoint, my presentation, I hate to use these terms, but I consider it a imposter, right? Because they're adding coloring and they're adding flavoring to that tequila in order to give it a certain impression, right? So if you actually read the label, it hasn't been aged. That is not, it's unaged tequila. So basically what it is, it's a Blanco tequila. What I do at the bottom, it's a silver tequila that has been introduced with coloring and flavoring in order to give it that hue of that, light brown or hay color. So I'm not a fan of Jose Cuervo, to be honest with you, but I am going to confess that I did use it at my restaurant when I did make margaritas, only because is it an inexpensive brand? It's on the lower end, but it's not on the lower tier. It's put it, I don't know if that makes sense or not. It's still a quality tequila, but it's not, it's not on the same level or range as some other premium tequilas. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, that makes sense. I didn't know that about the coloring, so that's definitely.
Yeah. And, since we're on the topic, and this has nothing to do with tequila, but a lot of bourbons, a lot of whiskeys do the same thing, because, put it this way, how can you're using different barrels to age the same product, correct? So how can a different barrel give you the same color in your product when it has different properties? Does that make sense? So a lot of your bourbons, a lot of your whiskeys, a lot of your scotches, right, do contain colorings and flavorings in order to create that consistency. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. We have a question from Paula, kind of in that same vein that you just were talking about, Nick. What do you think about single village mezcal? She recommends them to Scotch drinkers because of the smokiness.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great point. Please don't take this the wrong way. What was the name of the?
Paula asked it.
What was it? Paula?
Paula, yeah.
Paula, please don't take this the wrong way. No disrespect. I am absolutely, definitely not a fan of mezcal. The first time I tasted it was with Professor Brian Warner, and we were judges at it was an international tequila show in Las Vegas. And we were judging, I think it was 15 mezcals. And I had never tasted a mezcal before in my life. The first sip I took of that first mezcal, I thought I was drinking cigarettes. I hate that analogy, but I just don't know a better way of describing it. But to your point, yes, it's very similar to Scotch as far as the smokiness, the aging process, and they do share a lot of those characteristics as far as the palatability is concerned. But I think that mezcals are a bit harsher, right, than scotches and whiskeys in that category. But I'm biased. I'm sorry, I can't really give you a straight answer, but I can understand where you're coming from as far as the Scotch and the mezcal comparison.
Great. So Valerie is wondering, how are some tequilas less astringent than others if their alcohol content is consistent in the 40 proof range? She tasted Casamigos brand and it didn't have that overpowering bitter astringent alcohol flavor.
Right.
Curious on that.
That is usually the amount of times it's been distilled. So there's a misconception in the spirit world, beverage world, that the more times a spirit is distilled, the more, the smoother it will taste. Actually, what it does, the more times it is distilled, it actually extracts the actual flavor characteristics of that spirit. And at a certain extent, you know, once you start distilling, you know, 3, 4, 5 times, what's left is basically a tasteless alcohol, literally. So there is some misconception as far as, you know, you see, especially on vodkas, you see this a lot, that, you know, this distilled 7 times. For certain spirits, it works. For others, it doesn't. For tequila, it does not work. Distillation, tequila should only, in my opinion, be distilled no more than twice, tops 3 times, depending on, and again, it depends on so again, in order for it to be called tequila, you need 51% blue agave, and the other 49% is a neutral spirit. It also depends on what that neutral spirit additive is that they're adding to that 51% agave, that basically gives it that astringency or that final flavor or taste that you'll experience.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Diane has a question.
Sure.
So regarding to SOD, if a tequila has on their display panel that's 100% agave, is it Blue Weber, or does it have to state that it's Blue Weber?
If a tequila is 100% agave, it does not have to say Blue Weber as long as it says blue agave. So let me show you this, because the tequilas that I chose for today's tastings are blue agave. So if you look at, I don't know if you have purchased the bottle or not, but if you look here, it says Blanco, which is the type of tequila or the category. And underneath, it says 100% agave or blue de agave. It just says it in Spanish, or in de agave, blue agave. So it does not have to say Blue Weber, as long as it says blue agave or agave. It's still considered 100% agave tequila.
Great.
And just to sort of reiterate on that, for marketing purposes, they might say it, so you might see it on there. But again, a lot of us don't know what Blue Weber agave is, right? Before I started my career here at Johnson & Wales, I had no idea what Blue Weber agave was until I actually started getting certifications in spirits and mixology, that I discovered what a Weber Blue Agave is. And again, all that is, it's named after the botanist that discovered that specific species of agave plant. So.
Great. We have one last question.
Mm-hmm.
Is it true that tequila is considered low calorie?
Yes. Yes. 2 reasons. Number one, agave plants by nature do not have the same amount of residual sugar from its natural state, right? Like, let's say vodkas do, or gins or anything like that. So it is a true statement when they say that tequila does have, I mean, don't get me wrong, it doesn't have, you know, calories, yeah, per serving, but it's on the smaller range than other spirits. So if you're working out, if you're maintaining a healthy lifestyle, if you're watching your calorie count, if you're watching your diet, and you do like to drink, go with tequila as opposed to any other spirit.
Good to know. Well, thank you, Professor Makris. I'm going to turn it over to Lori Zabata, Director of Alumni Relations, to close us out.
Great. Thank you so much, Lauren. And thank you, Professor Makris, for leading us on tonight's tasting experience with tequila. It was such an informative discussion, and we're grateful that you shared your time with us this evening. Your extensive knowledge about this exotic spirit, your love for JWU, and passion for beverage education is not only impressive, it's also greatly appreciated. I'd like to thank the Alumni Relations team for their help behind the scenes, especially Lauren Anderson, Manager of Alumni Relations, for her work to bring this program to us. Finally, thank you to all in attendance tonight. Johnson & Wales is committed to providing you with robust and relevant programming while also supporting our current students. The donations you made when registering for this event will be put to work immediately within the College of Hospitality Management. Your gifts help ensure our students have modern facilities, lab spaces, and technology resources. Donations also help bring new courses and degree programs to students to prepare our rising stars for an industry that will need to be rebuilt and reimagined in the coming years. Gifts of all amounts add up to make a collective impact. And as an alumni donor, you also help enhance JWU's reputation, which increases the value of your own JWU degree. Thank you so much for your support. We sincerely hope that you enjoyed this evening's session, Sip with JWU, celebrating Cinco de Mayo, part of the JWU for You family of programming. Through JWU for You, alumni can engage in informative and interesting discussions related to professional development, social, and avid interest topics. This year, we're bringing Reunion to you. A week of virtual events, including a summer wine tasting, will be held from June 7th to the 12th. We hope to see you there. For more about this event, as well as the full listing of upcoming events, please visit our events calendar at alumni.jwu.edu. We appreciate your attendance and we wish you a wonderful night. Thanks so much, everyone.